Hello, everybody. Good afternoon here. I'm Miss Becky from the Upper Merion Township Library. I hope you're having a nice day so far and enjoying some of the sunshine that we have out there today. But I wanted to come to you and share a few more book talks, book recommendations for mostly middle grade and elementary school. So I have my recommendations today. All of the ones that I'm going to be talking about are books that can be found on Overdrive, which is one of the things that the library uses for their ebooks and audiobooks. So I have all of the books pulled up on my phone. So if you've watched some of these before, you know that I usually I usually show the book itself. I have run out of physical books to use right now. So I am going to show you the picture of the book on the app for Overdrive. And then I will talk a little bit about it, read you the summary, and tell you a little bit more about the book and who I recommend it for. All right. So let's see here. Let me see. All right. The first book, and by the way, if you are not familiar with Overdrive, as I said, it's what the library uses for their ebooks and audiobooks. One of the things, we also have Hoopla now. And there is an app called Libby that you can download too. So if you prefer to do it that way, you can download the app. That's what I'm using on my phone, and you can find all of these books there on Overdrive. All right. So let's see, my screen is jumping around a lot. I'm not sure if it's doing that for other people, but if you don't mind, because it does seem very distracting, let me double check here. If anybody is watching and can comment if that's happening for them as well, let me know. But if not, then I can just keep going here. Okay. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is called The Blackbird Girls by Anne Blackman. So hopefully you can see that there. This is the audiobook version on Overdrive. That's how I read this one. I used the audiobook. And it is a historical fiction novel that takes place in 1986, just outside of Chernobyl. So very interesting setting, kind of something a little bit different than what you're typically used to when it comes to historical fiction. A lot of kids read a lot of, World War II, Civil War type stories. This one is a little bit different, takes place in a different setting. So let me read you the description here. On a spring morning, neighbors Valentina Kaplan and Oksana Shavenko wake up to an angry red sky. A reactor at the nuclear power plant where their fathers worked, Chernobyl, has exploded. Before they know it, the two girls, who have always been enemies, find themselves on a train bound for Leningrad to stay with Valentina's estranged grandmother, Rita. In their new lives in Leningrad, they begin to learn what it means to trust another person. Oksana must face the lies her parents told her all her life. Valentina must keep her grandmother's secret, one that could put all of their lives in danger. And both of them discover something they've always wished for, a best friend. But how far would you go to save your best friend's life? Would you risk your own? So I believe in the book, the girls are in 5th grade. So it's a great middle grade read if you have kids that are around that age, or if you're into reading historical fiction and you're in middle grade. And one of the things that I really enjoy, not only is the subject matter interesting, but the relationships between the characters are really well done. They're very well developed characters, interesting relationships. So if you look for that in a book, then this is a really good one that I recommend for that. It's a little bit on the longer side, so depending on the length of book that you enjoy or maybe can handle, it might be a little long. But as I said, I also listened to this one on audiobook, and I thought it was very well done there. Okay. The next book I'm going to talk about is called Song for a Whale by Lynne Kelly. And hopefully you can see that there, because it is a really nice looking cover, really pretty cover. And we have this one on overdrive in both audiobook and ebook. And let me read you the description here. From fixing the class computer to repairing old radios, 12-year-old Iris is a tech genius. But she's the only deaf person in her school, so people often treat her like she's not very smart. If you've ever felt like no one was listening to you, then you know how hard that can be. When she learns about Blue 55, a real whale who is unable to speak to other whales, Iris understands how he must feel. Then she has an idea. She should invent a way to sing to him. But he's 3,000 miles away. How will she play her song for him? All right, so this is a realistic fiction book, and it's a great one to introduce to kids to kind of present that idea of understanding people who might be different than you, or relating to if they know anybody who is deaf. Really interesting insights into what that is like, because it's written from the perspective of the main character who is deaf and how she understands and interacts with her world, even though she can't communicate verbally with people. The story about the whale is very interesting too, if kids are into nature or animals. I think the main character in this one is also about 5th grade. So, and she's definitely on the younger, she's 12. So I think that puts her a little older than 5th grade, but she definitely is relatable for kids. I think that younger kids could read this one and relate to her and enjoy this too. And just a good realistic fiction if you have someone who doesn't like fantasy or sci-fi or historical fiction. This is a very well written one. All right. The next book I'm going to talk to you about is also a realistic fiction book. This one is called See You in the Cosmos by Jack Cheng. I really enjoyed this one when I read it. It is about an 11-year-old boy, and not just his life and his family relationships, but also his kind of passion and enjoyment of outer space, and his plans to try and build and launch his own rocket. So if you have a more science-minded kid, someone who would get into that idea of space exploration and rocket ship building, they may relate to some of the stuff that this character goes through. One of the things that I think is really interesting about this book is the format that it's written in. The boy is making recordings on his iPod to send up in a rocket into outer space so that aliens can hear it and learn about human life and culture. So the whole thing is written as recordings instead of written as a typical book. It's all written as if it's being spoken, and he's telling the story into like a microphone on his iPod and recording it. So for that reason, I enjoyed listening to this one on audiobook, but I've actually read it twice on audio and as a physical book, and it reads well either way. Here's the longer description for you. 11-year-old Alex Petrosky loves space and rockets, his mom, his brother, and his dog, Carl Sagan, named for the hero, the real-life astronomer. All he wants is to launch his golden iPod into space the way Carl Sagan, the man, not the dog, launched his golden record on the Voyager spacecraft in 1977. From Colorado to New Mexico, Las Vegas to LA, Alex records a journey on his iPod to show other life forms what life on Earth, his Earth, is like. But his destination keeps changing, and the funny, lost, remarkable people he meets along the way can only partially prepare him for the secrets he'll uncover. From the truth about his long-dead dad to the fact that, for a kid with a troubled mom and a mostly not-around brother, he has way more family than he ever knew. So even though on the surface, this book is very much about the science and the rockets, it also is really a book about family and journeys to kind of find yourself and understand the people in your life and maybe why some of them do the things they do, and to learn who in your family is really there for you and cares about you. And it's a pretty quick read, since, as I mentioned and the description mentioned, it's done as recordings. I feel like it kind of reads faster that way, because a lot of it is dialogue that's almost written like you would read a script. rather than a lot of description. So it can be a good option for kids that may struggle a little bit to read longer books. Even though the book is still 300 pages, but just the format of it, it goes a lot quicker. So they'll feel like they're reading a longer book, and they are, but it's not quite as complex as some other books and the way that they're written. All right, and the last book that I'm going to share with you today, one more. This one is called Jefferson's Sons by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. It's another historical fiction novel. If you listen to my book talks, you may end up hearing a number of recommendations for historical fiction because I personally read a lot of historical fiction. I'm a big fan of it. And I think it's really great for kids because they can learn about different time periods, but they also can still relate to the characters in the books and see that someone their age during a time period may have had a lot of similar feelings to what they feel now and deal with some of the same problems, no matter what's happening, where they are, whether it's time or place in the world. If you have been watching any of these and you heard me recommend The War That Saved My Life, which is one of my favorite books of all time, this book is by the same author, Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, and it is taking place during the Civil War, and it is about the children of Thomas Jefferson. So let me read you the description here. This story of Thomas Jefferson's children by one of his slaves, Sally Hemings, tells a darker piece of America's history from an often unseen perspective, that of 3 of Jefferson's slaves, including 2 of his own children. As each child grows up and tells his story, the contradiction between slavery and freedom becomes starker, calling into question the real meaning of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This poignant story sheds light on what life was like as one of Jefferson's invisible offspring. So definitely a little bit of a heavier topic, but if you have kids that are into historical fiction and learning about some of these heavier things and periods in time, it's a really great one. I would recommend, if you're watching this as a parent, for something to read with your kids, actually read it with them, even if you like read a couple of chapters and then have some discussions with it, because it makes for a really great discussion to talk about how could Thomas Jefferson advocate for these things in his political career and talk about, freedom and not being part of England, but then at the same time own slaves, and how do we justify that? And are these actions okay? And is he a good person? And just a lot of really great questions can come from this. So if you're looking to provide any sort of discussion or kind of moral lessons and that sort of thing, and get kids starting to think about that, this book is a great one. I've used it for some middle school discussion. I think last summer or 2 years ago, we used it over the summer as a literary lunch book. And the middle school kids that I worked with had a lot to say about it. They mostly enjoyed the book, but they definitely had opinions on it. And anytime you can give something to a kid who's going to have an opinion about it, I think that's a great book. So those are my recommendations for today. As I said, you can find them on Overdrive through the library's website, or you can download the app Libby and find them all there. And hopefully everyone is staying safe and have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.